partners once again. A little business between friends, and always just a step ahead of the law. Always just a step ahead of the law.
I guess my name is Dan Wojcik. I still am the owner of McCollum Mountain Ranch, Peat, and I was here to tell you the story about how we got started. It happened back in 1964. My father was looking for property. I was 14 at the time, and every weekend we used to go out and look for different parcels of land, mostly cut over timberland. And he found this one piece. He read an ad in the paper, cut over timberland, and McLeod and Raplin had listed it. Put an ad in the paper, and he read it about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Called up, and at about 6 o'clock, we were out there on the road going to look at the property. We got there, and there was a gate there, a cable, and we opened up the salesman opened up the cable, and we walked in there, and it was starting to get a little bit dark, but Dad saw the property for about 15 minutes. He could only see maybe 10% of the property at the most, and he told the realtor, "We'll buy it. We'll buy it right now." And so the next day, he went down to sign the papers, and they offered him $7,000 more for the property just to back out of the deal because they hadn't seen it yet. And we ended up buying the property. Every weekend after that, we'd go out and try to find the corners. He made some wooden stakes like this. There was little tins on the different lines and stuff. But we explored where it was at. It took us literally months to figure out where all the corners were at and look that way. But the story of the peat moss part is about 6 months after he had purchased the property, he went out into the bog, and it was not really, we call it a bog now, but back then we didn't know what the hell it was. It looked like a field. And so we went back in there and dug straight down, and there was this peat moss, really rich, foamy, or just beautiful material, mossy stuff. And that was what got us all excited. And since I was 14, I always knew that that's what I wanted to do, was dig that stuff out and sell it. But it literally took almost 20 years to go and get started on it. It really took that long. We just didn't have the money. And the way we got some of the money was I bought a D5 tractor that was financed by the ranch. We got a loan against it. I logged some of the neighbor's property, but I had this tractor, and I would do road work and clearing. And I met this individual and his name was Chris Phillips. He was a young guy. He was a stockbroker from Chicago, and he wanted some work done. And I showed him the material that we had, but and I said, I just wish I had some equipment to dig this out and get started. And he got really excited about that. And he did grow a crop in it for 1 year. He bought 115 acres, and then I did some work for him there. But he was an amazing guy. Oh gosh, I bet he was 26. 25. He had to be 25 to be a stockbroker. But I think he was 26, 27. He bought 3 seats on the Chicago Exchange. And I guess just within a short period of time, they're worth $150,000 a piece. So then what he did with that was, invest in things. One of the things he invested in was my business, because he loved the way the stuff would grow. It grew some fantastic plants, and that's what he came west for. He used to grow some cannabis, and that was back in, what was that, 79? So that's what he did. And so we benefited from that, because he bought 5,000 yards for us for like $16 a yard. But he didn't give us all cash. He gave us the use of a backhoe, and gave us some cash so we could pay some bills, because it costs a lot of money to do that stuff. So we got rolling that way on it, and that developed into a business that my dad started in 1982. But 1983, he died of cancer. And so then I took it over, and I just started giving it away in the beginning, kind of like that the little brochure I showed you, and it was all by word of mouth over must have been word of mouth for about 4 years, 5 years. But the first year we made $37,000. That was it, 37,000. That was in 1982. And then every year it would go up a little bit, go more and more. You know, I had a friend, Steve from Southern Humboldt, would get it and gave us some excellent comments on how well it did because it had all that nitrogen. So the testing showed that it was high in nitrogen, but it was low in phosphorus and potassium. So we bumped it up there in phosphorus and potassium. And and I had sent it in to get it analyzed. Sedge peat has a lot of buffers in it that filters out over abundance of organics or different deficiencies, or too much of one thing. So the analysis, when I sent it off to the lab, said, we do not understand how you can even sell this. And I was amazed by that. It has 150 times more phosphorus in it than is necessary for agricultural purposes. And that's what I guess power flower. What power flower, when you put your together, super soil was better in the first 3 weeks. Other ones were better in the first 3 weeks, but power flower after the third and fourth week, just the plants just shot out. Just no problem. That was the best soil there was for on the West Coast for a long, long time. I had literally customers come from all over Oregon. They travel 500 miles to get a pickup load of this dirt. That's how it was. Amazingly good stuff. And I have other recollections. We used to sell semi-loads of it because it was so pure and didn't have any pesticides or wood. It had a little bit of old rotten wood, but most of our wood was thousands of years old. Yeah, so we sold truckloads and truckloads of that for the worm farmers. They pack worms, night crawlers for the fishing industry in Sacramento, out of Lincoln there. That really kind of kept us going. And another thing that we sold too, I had lane dirt debris come out for Sun Valley Ball Farms out here. I used to make 1,000 yards of soil for them every year. But then we went into bags after that. I showed you that brochure where that's kind of interesting. And that just, it was all word of mouth, honestly. And start taking credit cards, and people were like just shoving money in my face all the time. I want my soil. They seriously get upset if we didn't have their soil on time. And we grew from 2 people, myself and my wife, and up to 11 employees. I had 6 dump trucks, or 6 delivery trucks. Some were flatbeds, some were dump trucks, and 4 drivers on the payroll. That was a hell of a business. We went from $37,000, and within 10 years, we were close to $2 million. And I'm not saying I did much, because really it was the dirt. The peat bog that was there, it was a high moor bog, and the high moor bog is where the peat moss lifts above water level, and then trees and everything grows on top. It's kind of like muskeg. It's 47 feet deep. It's a sinkhole, and some people thought they were meteorite holes. Yeah, there were sinkholes. There's a river that flows through that mountain. I've drilled 10 wells, different places on that mountain, and hit water up every place. One of the wells hit 350 gallons a minute. A big well, really beautiful tasting water. We don't use that much. What happened was the river would flow through that mountain right at the top too, not at the bottom, not mid-range. I always thought the water would be in the valley. Yeah, it's on the ridges. It's where the water is. And that's where we drilled. That's what the well drillers would recommend. And we hit water all over the place. And And the river that proves to me where the water is. Swayze Lake out there is 68 feet deep in about 14 acres. And you can go out in that, that's the highest water on the whole mountain. And I bought an altimeter so I could measure within a foot of where things were up and down. And that showed us that there was a river through there. And then we started digging down in those peat blocks. It literally took 20 years. There's stumps at the bottom. I mean, big virgin stumps, not sawed off with a chainsaw or anything. They had broken off, and you could see they were kind of flat, and the roots went way out, but they were right at the bottom, embedded in the blue clay. So at one time it sunk, and the whole area out there has a bunch of rills. Ridges are like this, and they might go for 300 or 400 feet, and up and down, up and down, up and down. And that's the whole thing slid apart at one time. There's a monstrous amount of water there, but that's not the only place that there's peat bogs in this county, or even in the state. There's quite a few. And there are wetlands, so you have to preserve them nowadays. But back then, the county had given us permission to go ahead and proceed with the process. But it took 20 years to do it. And then Chris Phillips helped out by, giving us sort of a line of credit. And we paid him in peat moss, which he sold to other people, and worked out good.